I remember that day as if it happened yesterday, though it was decades ago. The year was 1978, and our small town felt both familiar and endlessly full of possibilities. The streets were lined with brick houses, their windows glowing warmly in the late afternoon sun. Children played hopscotch on the sidewalks, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifted from the bakery on the corner. I was 17, walking home from the library with my head buried in a book, completely oblivious to the world around me. I was crossing Maple Street, my favorite spot to take a shortcut home, when I heard the screech of brakes. Time seemed to stretch infinitely. I barely registered the car, a dark green sedan, speeding toward me until the impact threw me to the ground. Pain exploded across my leg and shoulder, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. People rushed out of their houses, screaming, calling for help. I could barely make out faces in the blur of sun and shock. The driver, a young man with a pale face and shaking hands, stumbled out of the car, muttering apologies over and over. My neighbors came running. Mrs. Thompson, the kind woman from down the street, wrapped a blanket around me, whispering that everything would be all right. Someone dialed the hospital. The sound of sirens began to rise in the distance. As I lay there, every thought raced through my mind. What would my parents say? How bad was the injury? Could I walk again without help? Yet, beneath the fear and confusion, I felt a strange clarity. Life had shifted in an instant, reminding me of its fragility. That day on Maple Street, I realized how quickly normalcy could vanish, replaced by pain, fear, and the strange kindness of strangers. The ambulance arrived quickly, and I was lifted onto a stretcher, my body aching with every bump of the ride. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear, with nurses moving briskly and doctors speaking in clipped tones. I remember gripping the sides of the stretcher, trying to focus on anything other than the pain radiating through my leg. My mind kept replaying the accident, how I had looked up just a second too late, how the car seemed impossibly close. At the emergency room, X-rays revealed a fractured leg and a bruised shoulder, but nothing life-threatening. Relief washed over me, though it was mixed with a deep, unsettling fear. The young man who had hit me sat nearby, pale and silent. The nurse whispered that he had no criminal record, that it was considered an accident, but I could see the guilt written all over his face. My parents arrived shortly after, their faces pale and taut. My father tried to hide his worry behind stern words, while my mother's hands trembled as she held mine, promising everything would be fine. The days that followed were a blur of pain, sleepless nights, and endless visits from friends and neighbors. Mrs. Thompson brought food and stories to distract me, while my younger brother sneaked in jokes and childish laughter, breaking the tension in the hospital room. I realized how much people cared, even strangers who had just witnessed the accident, and it struck me how fragile human life really was. I also noticed something else, how quickly gossip spread. By the second day, the town seemed to have 100 versions of the story. Some said the driver was drunk. Others insisted I had run into the street recklessly. People debated, speculated, and judged, all while I lay there, powerless to defend myself. In those moments, I learned that fear, pain, and helplessness could reveal the hidden sides of human nature, some kind, some cruel. Weeks passed, and I returned home, though the world outside seemed unfamiliar. Walking, even with crutches, felt like stepping into a different life. My leg was still weak, my shoulder ached, and every step reminded me of how quickly everything could change. Simple routines, crossing the street, climbing stairs, opening doors, had become small battles. The accident left not only physical scars, but also a lingering fear that made me hesitant to trust the world around me. Neighbors visited regularly. Some brought meals, others offered quiet companionship. Mrs. Thompson, true to her nature, came almost every day, sharing stories of her youth and gently coaxing me to try moving more, exercising carefully, and not giving in to fear. Her warmth reminded me that kindness often comes from unexpected places, and that even after a traumatic event, human connection could heal wounds that medicine could not. School had changed too. Teachers were patient, but whispers followed me everywhere. Rumors about the accident spread faster than I could walk. Some students claimed I had been reckless. Others said the driver was reckless. My friends tried to shield me, but I felt exposed, like the event had peeled away layers of safety I had taken for granted. Every glance felt loaded with judgment, and I found myself walking with a heightened awareness of every car, every movement, every shadow on the sidewalk. At night, I often lay awake, recalling the accident over and over. I questioned myself, replayed the moment, and wondered how my life might have ended differently. Yet, amid the fear and anxiety, a strange determination grew inside me. I wanted to reclaim my life, to walk without crutches, to cross streets without trembling. The accident had changed me, but I refused to let it define me entirely. Months passed, and I slowly regained my strength. The crutches were replaced by careful steps, and then by confident strides. But the accident had left more than just physical reminders. It had altered the way I viewed the streets, cars, and even people. Every intersection felt dangerous. Every honk made my heart skip a beat. I realized that fear could linger far longer than pain, quietly shaping every choice I made. The young driver, Thomas, began visiting my home. At first, I refused to see him, anger and mistrust boiling inside me. But my parents convinced me to hear him out. When he arrived, his face pale and nervous, I noticed the genuine remorse in his eyes. He apologized repeatedly, explaining that he had never intended to hurt anyone and had been distracted for just a moment. Despite his words, I could not immediately forgive him. Trust is not rebuilt overnight, and some moments leave a shadow that lingers. Over the weeks, conversations with Thomas became easier. I realized that he, too, was changed by the incident. He had dropped out of college for a year, worked odd jobs, and carried guilt that weighed heavily on him. Slowly, a tentative understanding grew between us. I recognized that life is fragile for everyone, not just for the victims. People make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes change lives forever. Neighborhood life continued, but differently now. I noticed how small acts of kindness had become more meaningful. Mrs. Thompson's visits felt like anchors to a world that still cared. Neighbors who once seemed distant now stopped to ask how I was doing. The accident had fractured our routines, but it had also reminded everyone that life is fragile and that compassion matters in ways we often ignore. By the time I fully recovered, the accident had left an indelible mark on my life. My leg was strong again, and I could walk without hesitation, yet I carried the memory of that day in every cautious step and glance at passing cars. It had taught me patience, awareness, and an appreciation for life that I had never truly felt before. Simple things, sunlight on the street, a warm greeting from a neighbor, the laughter of children, felt precious, almost miraculous. I met Thomas one last time after my recovery. We walked along Maple Street, the place where everything had changed, and talked quietly about our lives. Forgiveness came slowly, not as a single moment, but as a process of understanding and acceptance. We acknowledged the pain, the fear, and the lessons we had learned. He promised to be more careful, and I promised not to let anger define me. It was a strange closure, born not of forgetting, but of seeing the accident as part of a story that shaped both of us. Life on the street returned to a kind of normalcy. Neighbors continued their routines, children played, and cars rolled by without incident. Yet, I remained aware of how fragile it all was. I had seen how quickly an ordinary day could turn into a life-altering event, and I never took small comforts for granted again. Mrs. Thompson visited me often, reminding me of kindness and community, showing that human connection could heal the deepest wounds. Looking back, I realized the accident was more than misfortune. It was a lesson in vulnerability, resilience, and empathy. It taught me that life could change in a heartbeat, but also that recovery, physical, emotional, and social, is possible with patience, understanding, and the support of those around us. That day on Maple Street did not just leave scars. It opened my eyes to the precious, fleeting nature of life and the enduring power of human compassion.